Hey everyone, my name is Austin, and I'm pretty excited to get into today's video, which is the psychology of groupthink and political polarization. Um, so try and imagine yourself in a room full of people, whether it be your friends, colleagues, family members. They share the same beliefs, your values, same passions. It's just like this safe place. There's this comforting sense of unity, and it's easy to assume that everyone around you sees the world the same as you. This connection is a powerful force in our lives. It's part of what makes us human, and we tend to thrive in these types of environments where we feel accepted and understood. But not so fast, because there's a catch to this. Unity can sometimes come at the cost of individuality. The need to belong can really push us into dangerous territories, and that's where the concept of groupthink comes into play. So groupthink is a psychological phenomenon where the desire for harmony and conformity in a group leads to flawed or even destructive decision making. When we prioritize group cohesion over critical thinking, we really risk overlooking the details. Making faulty assumptions or even making decisions that lead to catastrophic outcomes. We see many examples of groupthink in history. You could take the Nazi regime as a more obvious and extreme case where a nation's collective drive for unity led to horrific atrocities. It wasn't just Adolf Hitler and his inner circle. Millions of ordinary citizens, driven by the pressure of groupthink, accepted and even participated in cruelty justified by dangerous, simplistic narratives. But this isn't an isolated case. Throughout history, groupthink has kind of reared its head into different forms and under different banners. For example, in corporate scandals like Enron, where dissenting voices were silenced, employees and leaders alike kind of ignored ethical red flags that were all around. This desire to maintain group cohesion and protect profits led to one of the biggest financial collapses in modern history, causing massive public distrust and corporate integrity. You often see this very often in religious settings as well. Groupthink has been a powerful tool in religion, driving people to follow leaders unquestionably. Consider cults where members often prioritize loyalty over personal judgment. Leaders of the group use unity manipulation to encourage members to suppress doubts and avoid external influence. Most of the time with devastating consequences. The same dynamic can happen in various other social settings, from more subtle ones like school sport teams to community organizations, showing that groupthink's impact reaches far more than just high stakes situations. It's kind of woven into the fabric of our everyday lives and society. For instance, students may conform to popular opinions to avoid social exclusion. In a workplace, the need for team spirit can kind of suppress critical viewpoints, especially if employees fear backlash or backlash just for going against the grain. Even in something as seemingly harmless as sports fandom, we see how the need for unity can lead to intense groupthink. Fans of viral teams sometimes develop an us versus them mindset, turning like this love for the game into a space where dissent or difference is seen as disloyalty. There's a lot of back and forth with sports. This shows that groupthink is really universal. Amplified wherever there's a strong need for unity and just simply belonging. But here I'm very interested in the political realm of groupthink, where it's especially pervasive, often leading to oversimplified, polarized narratives. when people align themselves with a political party, they can really fall into patterns of accepting the party's position on complex issues without even critically assessing the details that are readily accessibly there. This sort of like echo chamber effect is intensified in media and corporate structures when stories are often tailored to fit specific agendas, reinforcing beliefs of their audience instead of fostering this sense of like just fostering an open discussion, really. A notable example of this is the way loyalty to a singular leader or ideology sometimes eclipse policy debates, within this right-leaning movement that's going on right now, or has been going on for some time, especially within the MAGA movement. Here, loyalty to the leader and adherence to the single narrative often overrides open discourse or policy evaluation, creating a strong groupthink dynamic. The movement has placed such a high emphasis on loyalty that listeners are often ostracized, and individuals may feel kind of pressured to conform, or they risk losing their identity within the group. This type of groupthink, it tends to discourage questioning or questions, and often dismisses alternative viewpoints as disloyal or anti-American. In more left-leaning circles, groupthink can also lead to issues where dissonance is sometimes seen as undermining the movement, and individuals are pushed to support prevailing narratives. While the effects of groupthink can manifest differently across the whole political spectrum, its tendency to simplify complex issues into binary black and white positions is a common factor. Political groupthink can really inhibit nuanced conversations and just make it difficult for society to address these issues to their full complexity like they need to be. In this video, I'd like to touch on the psychology behind groupthink. By understanding how it develops, why it's so powerful, and the ways it influences our lives. We'll explore how we can start and try to break free from this as well. Groupthink's consequences are far-reaching, affecting our decisions, beliefs, and actions in the way that aren't always so obvious. But by examining these dynamics, we can kind of learn to think more critically, value individual perspectives, and ultimately make decisions that reflect true understanding rather than blind conformity. Groupthink is not about poor decision making, even though that's definitely there. It's more of a form of psychological manipulation that takes place when the desire for unity within a group becomes more important than individual reasoning. It's when people stop thinking independently and instead think for the group, often abandoning critical questions to kind of follow the majority blindly. And then the really bad decisions start to happen when this starts to happen. To understand groupthink more deeply, it helps look how social individuals and groups develop over time. Groupthink is a psychological trap. It's a product of certain cognitive biases and developmental stages that make us prone to prioritizing group cohesion over critical thinking. So with that being said, I'd like to briefly introduce a little bit on Dr. Susan Cook-Greuter's ego development theory, which really gives valuable insights into how people progress through different stages of psychological development, each stage influencing how they relate themselves to others. According to Cook-Greuter, people at different developmental stages see the world and their role within it in varying ways. These perspectives can really make them more or less susceptible to groupthink. You see, at lower stages of development, people tend to be more dependent on their group identity. They see the world as It's kind of like fairly black and white, like this black and white way, really relying on certainty and structure provided by the group just to kind of feel insecure. It's a really shallow form of viewing the world, I guess you could say. For them, identity, beliefs, and values are tightly linked to the group, whether it's family, community, or a political party, or even religion. Religion's huge with this. These individuals find reassurance knowing that they belong, and as a result, they are often highly susceptible to groupthink. This group-centric level is characterized by a need for clear boundaries and a tendency towards rigid rule-based thinking, making them prone to ideological rigidity and simple narratives. Here, the group's approval shapes their sense of self-worth, and there's little to no room for ambiguity and the questioning of authority. And then we have like this sort of like mid-level of development where people begin to see themselves as somewhat distinct from the group. They start to question and analyze the status quo, but usually within like these bounds of what's culturally acceptable. These individuals are still, they're still influenced by external standards and tend to rely on the community's approval, but they begin valuing individual reasoning more than groupthink. Groupthink's less likely here, as it is still here, but the pull towards belonging can still override personal doubts, especially if they tend to feel ostracized within this mid-level. And then at like a higher level or higher stage of development, individuals they tend to think more independently and critically, feeling comfortable with ambiguity and complexity. They recognize that different perspectives can coexist, and they aren't really threatened by different views and opinions. Individuals in this stage are more resilient to groupthink because they no longer desire their self or derive their self-worth from conforming to a certain group. They've cultivated like this level of internal certainty that allows them to engage in nuanced thinking and avoid falling into simplistic narratives. So disclosure, this model goes extremely deep and deserves extensive exploration. Now, I plan on covering it more in the future, as it will be a continuous reference point throughout this whole channel. It's a pretty damn good model. Huge shout out to Dr. Susan Kirk-Grader. She poured her life into this. A few decades went into this model, so a lot goes into it, but we'll get into that later. So beyond developmental stages, there's a specific cognitive bias that fuels groupthink, making it hard to question authority or consider alternative viewpoints. These biases subtly shape our perceptions, often without our conscious awareness. One example is the huge one that I know we all fall into is confirmation bias. This is our tendency to seek out information that aligns with what we already believe, while ignoring or dismissing information that contradicts it. And this is really bad nowadays, especially with social media, because social media has those algorithms that kind of create this whole wall built brick by brick, so you can just take in all your confirmation biases and just see what you want to see, which it's actually a very disgusting thing. That's a huge problem with our society right now. These in-groupthink situations, people focus on ideas that affirm the group stance, reinforcing like this collective echo chamber where dissenting views are just overlooked. And then we also have authority bias, which this is huge right now, especially with Donald Trump. This bias makes us more likely to accept the opinions or directives of an authority figure, even when these directives may be flawed or ethically questionable. When an authority figure like a boss, religious leader, or political figure presents viewpoints, members of the group may feel pressured to align with that viewpoint, fearing repercussions or loss of social standing if they try to challenge it. And then we have in-group favoritism. We all suffer from this too. We naturally prefer the opinions and actions of those who we consider part of in our group, over those outside of it. This bias reinforces group loyalty and can really make people disregard the perspectives of others. Even if those perspectives are more accurate or insightful. In a groupthink scenario, in-group favoritism amplifies a sense of us versus them mentality. You're the enemy, preventing any real critique from just entering the discussion. These biases, they make it easier to slip into groupthink by just encouraging individuals to align with the group's opinion and view any deviation as a threat. This is especially true at the lower stages of Grader's model, where the need for certainty and authority is very strong. Individuals who feel strong, who have a strong need for certainty and authority, and just like this law and order, are especially drawn to ideologies that emphasize simplicity, loyalty, hierarchy. These qualities are often found within. We see them a lot more within right-leaning political movements, where allegiances to particular leaders or set of beliefs become a defining characteristic. This need for certainty creates an environment where groupthink can really thrive, as dissonant is often framed as a lack of loyalty or even a threat to the group's cohesion. For instance, we see some conservative movements, and there's like an emphasis on, they have this huge emphasis on loyalty of the group, the group's leader, with political debates kind of taking a back seat. It seems to be the movement's narrative often become simplified into like these stark terms. You're either with us or against us. Once again, this discourages members from really questioning decisions or policies, as questioning could be perceived as disloyal to the cause. The pressure for loyalty and any of the rigid black and white worldview associated with lower levels of the development really amplify groupthink and discourages open and nuanced conversations. Obviously we've seen this in the last Trump administration, where he constantly fired figures that weren't just simply sucking up to him. Now, it's essential to note that this need for loyalty and authority-driven groupthink is not exclusive to any political side. Groupthink can really occur in any type of group where cohesion is prioritized over critical thinking, and where members feel compelled to adopt the group's view, without examination. Understanding the psychological roots of groupthink, the developmental stages that foster conformity and cognitive biases, that reinforce it. It really gives us insights into how it can deeply influence individuals and communities. By recognizing the stages where we are more susceptible and understanding the biases that can distort the reasoning, we can kind of better equip ourselves to think critically, because that's what it's all about, just independent thinking and just trying to think more critically. Ultimately just can guard us against this trap of groupthink, because that's what it is, just a trap. So I'd also like to talk a little bit about spiral dynamics. I've mentioned it, I think, once or twice in my previous videos. This is another model that explores how human values and worldviews evolve. Spiral dynamics helps us understand why some groups are more prone to groupthink, especially in the political realm. This model describes like an evolution from basic survival needs, based thinking where group loyalty is key, to more complex thinking where values diversity, independence, and interconnectedness is more valued. In spiral dynamics, each color it's like a color chart. Each color, it represents like a different level of values of the worldview. For instance, the lower levels are more tribalistic, nationalistic, and often rely on authority. As individuals evolve, they progress to more inclusive, flexible, and nuanced perspectives. Let's briefly go over the colors, so you can kind of get a better grasp of this model. This model too, it requires a lot of focus just by itself. I mean, hell, you could probably spend the next 5 to 10 years with this model, studying society and all of society, and barely scratch the surface of it. So first we have beige, and beige is a survival sense, like basic survival instincts. We don't really have these people on Earth anymore. They're more like early humans, like prehistoric hunters and gatherers. So we don't really have to talk about those much. And then we have stage 2, which is like, it's purple. It's like kin spirit, like tribal, magical thinking. We have some of those, like in indigenous people. It's kind of where a lot of those people lie in. And then we have red, which is the third stage. It's kind of like power gods, these egocentric, power-oriented. These. This is kind of like tribal people as well. We have a little bit of purple and we have a little bit of red in our world, but not a lot. This is probably like the bottom 5-10% of humans on Earth right now. And then we have 4, which is blue. We have a lot of blue, kind of like truth force, order, authority, purpose. This is where many of the deep religious fundamentals appear. This is also where conservatism starts to really appear. Then we have orange. This would be number 5. This is where probably I'd say most people in the world are at. This strive drive. These achievement, success-oriented people. I would say here this is also where a lot of Trump supporters are allied to. I'd say this is where Trump resides too. And these aren't about economic growths and stuff. You could be rich at any stage. This is just more of like moral, ethical, conscious development type of stages. So after orange, we have green. These are like the human bond, community equality, and sensitivity. Like these kind of like bleeding heart liberals. You're getting into where all these like progressives tend to fall into. And then we have yellow, which I think yellow is a good goal for our where we need to take our society. This is like flex flow, systems thinking, integration. That's where I think this model kind of subsides into. Same with Susan Cook-Reuter's model. These are very yellow types of ways of examining and looking at the world. These are the great thinkers of the world, like the Einsteins, the Bill Gates, Elon Musk. Although Musk is completely being bought out at the moment, which is very questionable. And then we have, after yellow, we have turquoise. This is like a global view, holistic, global awareness. Here you have your mystics, your sages of the world. This is a very rare person that most will probably never come in contact with. And then there's a ninth one that's been added. This is coral. This is like meta, integral, transcendent, cosmic awareness. These people are basically aliens, and you'll probably never see or hear about them. So we don't really have to talk much about those or that stage. But yeah, that's kind of a brief overview of the spiral dynamics. And remember, it's a spiral, so you can be in multiple stages at once. Nobody's set in one stage. You know, so exploring these levels and these lower levels, I think that's where groupthink really resides, and it is in these lower levels. Like red and blue, getting into orange. They tend to value simple, clear-cut answers and just authority figures. They're often more vulnerable to groupthink, because they look to leaders for guidance and just rely on us first in thinking. These individuals want safety, clear hierarchies, and loyalty within their group. For another example, sorry, my camera cut out. But yeah, where were we? So, for example, political movements like MAGA, which everybody knows means Make America Great Again, it really appeals to people operating in these lower stages of spiral dynamics. They promote like a loyalty first, America first narrative that discourages questioning of the group. This movement appeals to those who value certainty, simplicity, and authority, creating an environment where groupthink really tends to thrive. Here we see a big focus on symbols like flags and slogans that create a sense of identity, solidarity, and even authority, reinforcing a more simplistic worldview. For individuals at these stages, these symbols become sort of like sacred and unquestionable. They represent security and strength, and if anyone questions these symbols, it often feels like a personal attack on the whole group's values. This leads to a sort of defensiveness and hostility, making it really difficult for engaging in open dialogue. So, with all that being said, let's talk about how we begin to break free from groupthink. I believe that self-awareness is the biggest tool for this. The first step in breaking free is just simply just gaining more self-awareness. Really, I mean, you just kind of ask yourself, am I truly considering all sides, or am I just following the group? Introspective practices like journaling, meditation, and talking with people who hold different views are very essential for this. Also, encourage dissonance. We should always create an environment where we welcome opposing voices. Whether it's in political settings, workplaces, or communities. Different views should be seen as a pathway for growth. Not a threat. Encourage respectful debates and just kind of, I don't know, it'll really help. I think it'll really help develop more effective solutions. And then I'd like to say, build empathy, and this sort of like open dialogue. This kind of goes back to the other one where you're welcoming opposing viewpoints. Engaging with others' perspectives is not just not try to convert them, but to understand them is crucial. This is also an important principle in spiral dynamics. Valuing diverse worldviews instead of just outright rejecting them. And then empathy and open dialogue can kind of start to begin to bridge these divides, I feel. And then also have practicing complexity. I think that's a huge one too. Challenge yourself to move away from the more black and white type of thinking and try to tackle more issues with complexity. Complex issues rarely have simple solutions. By engaging with complexity, we can train ourselves to avoid these traps of oversimplification and groupthink. And then last, I think this is also up there with self-awareness. It kind of goes hand in hand, but just good old-fashioned personal growth. Breaking free from the groupthink, it's going to require a lot of personal growth. As we advance psychologically, we become more independent thinkers. Less influenced by group pressures. This means cultivating the courage to question and begin to start refining our beliefs over time. While unity can bring strength, true progress comes from embracing individual thought over blind conformity. Diversity of thought isn't just a luxury, it's essential for uncovering truth and making ethical, informed decisions. Groupthink, especially in rigid political ideologies, poses a real danger to our society. It's up to each and every one of us to really challenge and critically engage with the groups we're a part of and that we're not a part of, just to ensure we're contributing to a healthy, more thoughtful world. Yeah, so let's try to prioritize personal development, expanding our perspectives, and just moving beyond simplistic loyalty and any one type of ideology. Choosing growth over conformity. It's not just a path to self-betterness. Or betterment. It's the foundation of a truly evolved and adaptable society.